Another episode of the AV Experience. I'm your host, Ryan, joined by the amazing, the now feeling better, Ben Goff. He is alive and with us, though the world tried to take him away. He's here. Ben, you're surviving in Asia. It's
Yeah.
super humid there.
Yeah, self-inflicted. Not working
Those are
too
the
hard, not
worst.
drinking enough.
Those are the worst.
I was just not looking after myself. Too many hours on site, and probably, I guess, whichever day it was, I got probably 4 liters short of the amount of water I needed. It was it was less than ideal.
But you've made progress.
Yeah,
That's
back on
good.
site. It's I took 1 day in bed and then straight back out. Screen went up today, so I left site here about 20 minutes ago. So it's now 9:05 here in the evening. So it was
You showed me some
half-eight
pictures.
finish
That
today.
room is ridiculous. Peter and I talked about it yesterday when we were doing the stream for AVS Forum, and I'm jealous of the height.
Right.
That ceiling height is,
Yeah.
not cool, man.
And that's not even all of it.
I know. I heard.
We've reduced the ceiling height in the room because actually the box I've never ever had this. I've never had this. The box they gave us was actually too tall. That we had to make a decision. It was designed originally. The first thought was that there would be 3 tiers to a riser, but the geometry it wasn't ideal for what the client said they actually wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
So we reworked the geometry and we've turned it into 2 tiers, which means we didn't even need all that ceiling height. So we've got it's getting on for 3 foot under the riser, the lowest section of riser.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
there's
a
like
big room.
2 feet above the false ceiling. It's shocking.
Yeah.
And then you think about it, like you've got all these subs. That ceiling height increases the internal volume of that room significantly.
Huge.
So it makes sense that you need that amount of horsepower to do proper bass in that room. I mean, you look at it, you're like, why do you need that much power? And then you look at the room and its volume and go, oh, this makes more sense. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've joked before that my entire home, with all walls, like I could take the whole home, fits inside this room.
Yeah.
Eat comfortably, I would guess. It's a big space.
It is a big space. It's going to be a very pretty and very well done space. I'm excited for you to continue making progress, and I'm excited to see how that thing turns out and what the measurements actually look like.
Projection on tomorrow. It won't be calibrated. Peter's coming out to calibrate it in a couple of weeks' time. So when we leave here Saturday, it will all be running. It will all be tested. We will have heard it, but it definitely won't have been calibrated.
How much longer are you there?
We leave Saturday.
Okay.
So 2 more.
So next stream you'll be home.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just about. So it'll be good.
Today's topic is, can subs and speakers be too big for a room? Ben came on and was like, I have not prepared. And I said, this is the way of the stream. This is how we do these things. We don't prepare for this at all. I don't know what you're worried about. We don't do any of that here. It just makes for a more organic and fun experience. And I told him we may be on a totally different topic by the end of this. Who knows? We're going to find out. Just like the last one where we thought we were going to go a different one direction and we didn't even talk about anything of spending money. It was talking about how do you set up the room and things you got to think about ahead of time. So it is what it is. But can a speaker and or sub be too big for room? Let's start with speakers. And let's just start with what we would consider like a average room. What would you consider as an average room in the UK?
So I would guess an average room for us in Europe is smaller than for you guys.
Maybe not as different as you'd think.
Somewhere between 4 meters by 5 to 5 by 6 would be
not a small room, but yeah, we'll use that. That's fine
for us. as in for our company.
Yeah,
that would be a small room.
So you're 4 meters. You're thinking that's roughly 13 feet by 5 meters. So say 16 feet. So 13 by 16. Somewhere.
Yeah, I think
not a small room.
I've got rooms that we did in the last 5 years that are what maybe under 3 meters wide, so
Yeah,
13 foot wide.
yeah.
That's getting small.
But let's focus on what we're calling average of like 4
Yeah,
meters by 5 meters. I know it may not be average, but that's a in the States, that's a decent size. That's a pretty good sized bedroom, right? It's not
right.
small. It's you can convert a extra bedroom into a space. Do you feel, and let's just focus on LCR right now. Do you feel a speaker can be too big for a space? And take that for however you want to take it. This is just a
Yeah.
generic
So
comment of can it be too big?
I think there's a difference between physically big and it's designed for a bigger room than you've put it in.
Sure.
So
But
I think
let's
that's a
start with
nuance.
physically
Like,
big, and then we'll come back to the other part.
can it be too physically big? Yeah, I guess it still can, and that is part of the same thing. So, actually, the week I was out for Senior Expo,
Mhm.
I heard it was the day before Expo started, at a factory store. I had a really big pair of speakers in a fairly small listening room, and you could sense like they were possibly some of the best speakers I'll ever hear. They weren't at their best in that room.
Which speakers were they? Can you say?
They were YG Acoustics, their biggest, like $1 million a pair. I forget what they're called.
That's what
But they
Christian
were.
has, not that those speakers, but he has YGs in his area now, doesn't
Who,
he?
sorry, does?
Not Christian. Why am I thinking Christian? Adam.
Yeah, no, Adam
Adam does.
Keplinger. Yeah,
Yes.
it was Adam who arranged the tour.
Ah,
And the YGs he has in his living room sound incredible. They suit the space. They sound absolutely incredible. You know, this was a pair of speakers maybe 20 times more expensive,
mm-hmm.
4 or 5 times the volume, in a room that is maybe a quarter less than the size of his room. And the sense I had is, as much as they were some of the best speakers I'll possibly ever hear, I felt like I would have enjoyed them more if I could get 6 feet further away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Let them do their thing. Like they're 6 feet plus tall, I guess, a big multiple array,
Mm-hmm.
just to give that space to have combined and be giving you that presentation that it's designed for. I felt like we were sat closer than they wanted us to be.
Now, do you feel that that was a big issue because of where those speakers may have been summing? Like all of the drivers may have been coming together and it just may have been you weren't able to get far enough away from them. And this to go back kind of goes back to what you're talking about with the pro side. There are design decisions and there is a point where drivers are angled that there is an ideal position, right? Where
Right,
frequencies, waves, and stuff come together. And if you're too close, depending on the design philosophy of the speaker, it's not ideal. So I
right.
will absolutely agree with that. But let's tone this down a little bit. And let's say if we're looking at not enormous speakers like
Yeah,
the YGs or something like a blue horn or something that's just horns, especially. And let's just say some larger than average towers. Like, do you feel, I'll just name one. Do you feel that an S7T can be too big for a room? It's a big speaker. It's not a small speaker, but it's not an enormous speaker by
yeah.
comparison. Do you
I
feel
would
like it
say
can be too big?
I don't. I'm kind of gonna say no, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that right. Of course, there is a room it's too big for. There
Sure.
definitely will be a room, but have
I
I
guess
found
this
it?
is
I
going
like
back to the sense of you hear on forums and stuff, "Oh, that's too big for this room." Like, you need to get the proper size speaker for the room, and I don't buy that. I think it's you should be buying based on the capabilities that you need, and as long as you're not running into a issue where an alignment issue where
right.
things are coming together time-wise,
Yeah,
I don't really buy that. I think as long as it fits in the space and you can give it enough space off of a wall for what it's designed to do, if it's rear ported or what have
Yeah.
you, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's maybe not a good value decision. No, I guess plenty
That's
of
fair.
differences. Like, you may be better off with a smaller speaker. Like, there's a scale, and we've talked about this before. We talked about on the AVS podcast. We do perceive sound differently when it's propagated a different distance. The room volume affects our perception. You maybe don't want to listen as loud in a really small room.
Sure.
You maybe don't need as deep a bass in a small room. Just perceptually, you may not enjoy that as much. So is it like, if you're looking at an S7T, would you get a better result from a smaller model, maybe a smaller model with a small sub? But I think in a small room, you probably can achieve a better value result, a better result for the money spent.
So you're saying instead of spending the money on a tower or a bigger speaker, take that money and spend it on a smaller speaker and then something that goes in conjunction with it, like subs or
Yeah, quite possibly. Like, I think a little, like an S4B and an R8 sub. I mean, that's a great small room system.
yeah.
And that's probably less intrusive in the space. That's less trip over them when you walk in if it's a small room. You've got the option. You can get those out onto the wall. You can probably optimize the feel of the space and the spend and the performance other ways in that brand. And I think that's any company that make great speakers and subs, and there aren't loads of those.
No.
The companies who make great speakers and great subs are an exception, not a rule. They're not that common.
No.
But the brands who do, and for me, per listen, are one of those companies, absolutely. A small subsat system is probably a better way to spend the money than a big tower in a small room.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to, we've talked about this time and time again, of defining what the expectation is of the room and then getting equipment that can meet that expectation. And for a room that's that small, the S7T is going to be so far past what you need for that.
Right. Exactly.
You don't. You're better off spending appropriately to meet the expectation and then doing the other things you need to do in order to have a better phasal response from the subs, to be able to put in different acoustic treatments in order to mitigate other potential issues, so on and so forth. Now, speakers, I don't think we need to spend much time on that. Subs, I think, are the one that a lot of people...
I would say before we leave speakers, there is a point to conclude of the physically big versus designed for too big a space.
Yes,
and
good point.
A couple of the comments that have already come in. We've got comments about horns particularly, and that's like, I'll see quite often people making comments in forums and groups that, oh, there's a commercial theatre down the street closing down. I can go and buy their Electro Voice horns and put them in my 30 square meter room. Yeah, they're not.
You're like you're sitting in the waveguide.
Right. So what we're hearing is absolutely the combination of the room and the speaker. It's the first reflections, the second reflections. Now, if a speaker has been designed to play in a very long room, like a commercial theatre would be, it's probably focused quite narrow. It's not got a wide dispersion. They're trying to send the energy as narrow and as long down that audience to get depth rather than necessarily width. Well, if that's a small room, that's you've not got that. So suddenly you are now firing that straight at yourself, a very narrow dispersion. You're not getting the same room cues, which means you're now just getting a big reflection off the back wall, because you're peppering that back wall. That's it's all going there. So now you've got this longitudinal reflection that's not ideal.
Yeah.
You've not got the width reflections that would give you that apparent image width, that spaciousness, that broadening of your soundstage. So you can absolutely put a speaker in a room that's too small for what it's designed, even if it's not physically too big. And I think that, before we leave speakers, we should just mention that is definitely something people do. And it's not uncommon. Let's put it that way.
I wouldn't say it's common, but it's definitely not uncommon because people think,
Yeah.
oh, this speaker was in a commercial cinema. I can have a commercial cinema experience at home. And you're not going to get that same experience because it's designed. It's like taking a speaker that was designed to use at a sports stadium that's made to
Right.
do a certain thing and then expecting it to behave a totally different way, even though you may not be thinking that, in a small residential space. And that's not going to happen.
Now, let me tell you that L Acoustics might disagree, but L Acoustics will happily sell you the same speaker that they'll put in a stadium.
There are ways to get around it.
Sure.
But
and it involves being very smart, not just buying it
yes,
from a closeout sale.
yes, there are ways to get around it, and there are speakers that are much more flexible than others, depending on how they've done things. Line arrays and stuff can do some cool stuff, but it's not ideal in every sense. A lot of times you're going to have a bad time.
It's not something to do without a lot of planning. That's for sure.
Yeah. So subs, this is the one that comes up a lot more frequently. And not only, I think it'd be good to talk about this in a couple different ways. Can a sub be too big for a room, but can it also be too big for a type of experience? Like, I hear this all the time, and this comes from certain manufacturers. I'm not going to name names, but certain manufacturers will say, and people that believe in these manufacturers will say, well, this sub is more musical. This one is this one is that. And this one does better at infrasonics than this one does. And let's talk about this kind of broadly, because I think people assume that big subs are slow. Big subs are not performative. They're going to be really sloppy. They're going to be, they're just big and boomy is what it's going to come down to. And while I think that can happen, I think that can happen at any size. It's a poorly designed sub. Because my main experience was the Black Swans with what was then the 50. Yeah. And I mean, the job you're working on is a bunch of 28-inch subs, which is enormous for a lot of people.
A 28-inch square. So it's even bigger, because it's not a pi r squared, it's a square driver. That's a lot of surface area.
So what's your feeling on, let's start with, can a sub be too big for a room? And let's get out of the way that, yes, a sub can be physically too big. Like if you have a room that's 4 meters by 5 meters and you try and put a 100-inch subwoofer in there, it's too big. You can't get far enough away from it. It's physically too big for the space. Right. It does not work. The room would be the subs cabinet, right? That is, it's too big. If I had my room, right, in the visible part of my room is 14 by 14. If I tried to shove the 64 into that space without the box actually being out of the room, it would be too big because it would not fit.
Physically too big.
So let's get that out of the way, that if the sub physically fits, can a sub be too big? And let's draw the line let's take out of the equation a lot of these extreme subs like this 64 and the 100 and stuff. And let's just talk about, I'm going to say average, but your 12, your 18s, your 21s. I know those are still big. A lot of people would consider a 12 to be big, but can it be too big? I don't think so.
I'm going to say no, but I'll caveat it that this idea of, and certain manufacturers perpetuate this more, as you said, that, this type of sub is more musical, or this is a good kick sub. And these terms, they're almost independent of its size. You can make a really big, really musical sub, but that's harder and more expensive. So
Yes.
there's a balancing act between its size, its output, its cost. Yeah, I see all the time subwoofers that people rave about its SPL numbers. Oh, it can output these huge numbers, and then you take like a per listen sub that some of those are physically big. You take a 215.
Yeah.
That's a physically big pair of 15s. Like that's a big sub. And on paper, you might not think it digs as deep or plays as loud as other people's subs that might cost half the money. That is just using a big 21 or a 24. It's like, they've gone a different way and they've come at a lot lower price. And it plays louder, it plays deeper. Right. But that's missing the quality, because a lot of the per listen magic in those subs is in the electronics, and actually in their limiters. They do some really, really clever things. They maintain incredibly low distortion, even when you, like, I was going to say abuse them, but you almost can't abuse them because the limiters are good enough to stop you doing that. So there's a challenge of, if you go big without the quality, then absolutely that will give you the impression it's too big for the room. But the problem may be that if your budget was $2,000 for a sub, what your money would buy you is a really, really, really good 12, 14, 15 inch, or it would buy you an entry level 21. Yeah, I'm making numbers up, right? But that's I think that's where it gets to, is I don't think the sub is necessarily too big for the room. I think sometimes the sub is too big for the budget.
That's a good way to look at it. What I've run into, we did this test at M-Wave a couple years ago when we were doing sub comparisons, and I won't name what subs were used, but there was 2 subs in particular that were right next to each other. And people thought that one of them was bringing in a lot of distortion. But what was actually happening, and I showed this using pass filters, was the one they thought was going into distortion was actually able to play significantly lower than the other one. So people were misconstruing musicality for a lack of extension.
Right.
And they assumed that it sounded cleaner because it wasn't able to extend.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
And
I've seen plenty of subs that are described as fast and musical, and when you measure them, they're barely subs. I mean, they're barely performing below a decent woofer in a tower. Like they're rolling off from 30 hertz. Well, sure, of course it's fast. You've thrown 1,000 watts at a woofer, but we were after subwoofers. Like, it's not the same thing. So yeah, that's lack of extension is an easy way to give that impression for sure.
And it was shocking how many people were misconstruing this fact, and then they were saying, "Oh, well, it's slow." And it goes back to people mistaking distortion for loudness. They're mistaking distortion for low end extension. And it's really important that you know what is actually going on in order to properly implement. But unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers are pushing these claims, and it's not great for the industry. So I do like your analogy, though, or not necessarily analogy, but how you said it of it's more of lack of budget for a sub size. And I would agree with that, that as the sub gets bigger, it's going to get exponentially more expensive before you encounter quality in a lot of situations. Now, talking about extension, I do think it's also important to note that in a lot of cases, there are trade-offs. So it is important to recognize that there is a reason, like take Ascendo's 21s. Ascendo's 21s are not infrasonic monsters, right? It's not what they were designed to be.
Nope.
There were sacrifices that were made in cabinet size, in driver, in order to keep group delay appropriate and to
Right.
create and really focus on capability at certain frequencies versus other ones. Because
Yeah.
as with most things, there is a compromise. If you start going into, hey, I want everything and I want to start bringing this low end frequency up, well, I'm probably going to have to sacrifice in another locale in order to make that happen. So it becomes a balancing act. This is not me saying you can't have both, because there are some, I mean, look at the 28. The 28's ridiculous, but it makes compromises in other ways. One of the
I,
big ones being money.
right. I think the 28 probably has a compromise on cabinet size. I recall a conversation with Jeffrey
Small.
early when we started designing the room we're building now, that he was considering a bigger cabinet version of it because he could improve the efficiency.
Yeah.
And then there's a question of, well, can we physically fit? Like, does the market need that product? Because actually what the 28 does, it does incredibly well.
Did you have to move any of those 28s while you were out there?
On this trip, not physically. We have
you
we have an airbag lift system with rollers, so they're already on shelves. I will say that 4 of them have been moved into place on this trip. Christian and I did not partake. That was local labor.
I remember when he first brought those subs out, they did not have handles. And they are dense monstrosities. I mean, they have, if I remember correctly, it's 4 voice coils because it's 1 per corner.
Yeah.
And they're not small. I think they weigh over 300 pounds a piece.
Yeah, I was going to say between 3 and 350. It's somewhere in there.
And they are not very deep, and they're really awkward to hold. And my thing with Jeffrey is I don't think I would want them any bigger, just because they'd become even more of a pain to move. Regardless
and
of the
ship
capability. It'd be awful.
Yeah. And we've made them worse to move. So we've put every single one on some isoacoustic feet, and the rubber is so sticky. It once that is sat on its shelf, you've almost got to break the grip that the foot is giving to the shelf. Like the lift force, I reckon, to lift it back up is probably pushing 450, maybe 500, because you've got to break the suction that it's created to the you don't put it down in the wrong place.
Yeah. I don't remember where I went with why did I come
so
to
but a big, it's that almost Hoffman's iron law, right? We can have cabinet size SPL extension. To make one bigger, the other's got to go. If you want more extension, the cabinet's got to get bigger.
Yeah.
If you want more efficiency, if you want it to play louder for the same cabinet size, you're probably going to lose. Like those 3 things, it's kind of pick 2, and you have to sacrifice one.
Yep.
Or if you want more of all of them, you've got to grow the whole thing, right?
You're going to need has to get bigger.
Right. So, yeah, and that's always interesting, isn't it? Of chasing those things, because I think that's where some of this musicality comes from, is sacrificing extension potentially for, I'm going to say speed, and I hate it being described that way, but probably lack of group delay. So
call it attack or something.
Right. It's that fast musical kick, that
the ability for the driver to start and then immediately stop and not ring.
Right. I think you can achieve that, if you make the cabinet a bit smaller, and it's sealed, right? Now it's building more pressure inside that is going to resist some of that motion. That's going to help some of that reduction in the ringing after it's played. It's going to try and help return it to its position.
Got more dampening
at the cost of extension.
Yep.
So I think that musicality is an interesting balance of, by slightly undersizing the cabinet on an extension perspective, you're maybe getting more of that snappy musical kick. And we naturally confuse lack of extension with musicality already. So you can really see how a sub can be more musical when it is a bit snappier, potentially, and it doesn't have extension. Well, great. But that doesn't mean a big sub can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
A big sub can do that, but you'll need more money.
The funny thing, though, is that actually a big sub, if properly done, would be better because less extension would less excursion would result
Right.
in less distortion.
You do it at lower distortion levels.
Yes. So if you compared something like, I don't know, a 12 to an 8, theoretically you would have less distortion because there's less you have a greater surface
Right.
area. But in order to do it well, it's gonna cost more.
Yeah, and this is the thing is, as we go lower and lower in frequency, the amount of air you physically need to move is ramping up exponentially. And to do that on a smaller driver, your excursion goes through the roof. You know, you need, if you want to keep excursion under a reasonable limit, which distortion will absolutely be tied into. And it's an interesting thing with the 28. So a 28 has, at the bottom end, the infrasonic end, about half the output of a 32. But it's not really any small. Like, it's dimensionally, okay, it's shallower, but they're both big things.
They are. The 32 is a lot bigger than the 28, at least with its cabinet. I mean,
Sure.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Driver size versus driver size. The 28 is large.
Right. It's not like you look at the pair of them and think, oh, in the bottom end, I'm going to need 2 of these to match a 32. Like, visually, you wouldn't make that assumption. In my mind, the 28 is almost indescribably better than a 32. And I say that as somebody who owns 2 32s, and that upsets me a little bit. But it's not a bit better than a 32. It's an order of magnitude better than a 32. It's so far beyond.
Where are you? What frequency range?
All of them. What frequencies? All of it. I mean, you'd run it to 500 hertz if you, because it just goes, it goes
can keep
up
going.
and up. And I was just doing a first bit of tweaking today, and I've made every single one of them. There's 18 of them. I've made them flat to 12 hertz. I've got headroom. I could push them flat to 10 easily. I could probably push them lower, but I've just set them for running in for site radio. I've pushed them flat to 12 hertz. Of course, down there I'll need 2 of them to do what a 32 does, and they're a lot of money and they need a lot of power. But the quality of the bass is, it's just leagues better. It's not even close. Not even anywhere close.
What was I? Oh, so here's a question from St. Louis sports audio fan, and he says,
okay, so we got Big Street Cinema just said the 28's playing 10 dB less at 10 hertz than the 32. Right. So down at that level, it's you need more than 2 of them, right? So I'm guess the numbers I'm thinking when I think you need 2 of them is probably slightly higher. We're probably up at 14, 15 hertz, but maybe even a bit higher. But yeah, like realistically, for that real infra, you need multiples of a 28.
And a big reason for this, I'm assuming, I don't know because I'm not in that room, is because the distortion that the driver is creating and the harmonics that you're actually hearing at higher frequencies are probably lower on the 28 than versus the 32. But it's coming down to a quantity versus quality conversation, and you're able to get away with more of the quantity versus quality down at those lower frequencies because of our lack of hearing. But as I just said, harmonics do play into this. And while you may not hear your sub 20 hertz frequency, you probably hear a harmonic of that up above that, and you may just not realize it. So it does come into effect. Sports audio fan, doesn't a sub driver need to have a certain excursion to perform optimally? It seems that if you buy too big a sub for the SPL you want, the driver isn't able to perform as designed. I don't agree with this.
I I can't say from experience I have that experience. I think if you're like, we're looking at amount of air moved, so volume displacement. So if we can displace the amount of volume that we want to with less excursion, generally, like, if everything else is like for like, I'd expect to see lower distortion levels.
Yes.
And maybe, and I don't know, but some people have become so accustomed to the sound of distortion that it's easy to confuse a subwoofer that sounds cleaner for not being optimal, because actually their ear is attuned to pushing a smaller sub harder and hearing that distortion. That's definitely possible.
Potentially. Could you say, though, that beaming would play any part of this? I wouldn't think at these frequencies, but
I need to do some maths on the wavelengths, but no, not really. Not where we're using it.
one of the most musical experiences I ever had is what brought me into my room now. I mean, the 50 with the then 50 and the Black Swans, and it was a
Right.
2-channel experience, and that 50, you walk up to it, and you'd look at it and be like, is it even on? And then you touch it, and it was absolutely
Yeah.
on, but because the surface area is so large, it's able to displace such an enormous amount of air without seemingly moving. But then once it starts moving, like I'm sure you're seeing when you're playing flat on the 28s down to 12 hertz, it's kind of terrifying how much that thing can actually move, but you're able to push much higher SPLs with seemingly the same amount of excursion because you have a much greater surface area.
Yeah. I mean, we may have turned the site radio up last night louder than maybe we needed to, but we were pushing about 110 dB at 30 hertz while we were cleaning up last night. And because there's so many subs and there's so much surface area, you still couldn't actually see any individual one of those subs moving. I mean, they were obviously, but visually,
Yeah.
they weren't. And we were, 110 dB, and that because there's no distortion, like it was just so clean. You're in that really confusing point of, oh, it's not even that loud, and then you check an
Yeah.
SPL meter, you're like, oh no, it is really.
Oh, no,
loud.
it very
Shit.
well is. This comes
Yeah.
down back to, though, there is a definite difference in quality. Like attack, when people talk about attack and ringing, and there is a lot of stuff that people don't think about where they'll say, oh, well, as long as the sub is able to play that, it's fine. But there's a lot more to a quality sub than just that. I mean, its ability to stop once it's playing to
Right.
remove ringing is a
Yeah.
big part of this. And people have a tendency to overlook a lot of these pieces, not even just with subs, but with speakers. Their ability to stop is just as important as their ability to start and play.
Yeah.
And that is overlooked in a lot of conversations. So I do think part of this could be that, going back again to what you said, it's more of spending enough to get a quality larger driver. It usually costs more. And I
Right.
think in a lot of senses, in a lot of situations, potentially people aren't spending enough to get quality. I mean, you might be, I don't know, but it
But,
costs exponentially more as the
right.
size of the driver gets
But
bigger.
then there's another balance to the size, the physical size, the presence in the room, the budget, which is that, like, and where a sub may essentially be too big for the room is ultimately more subs is better. Right? You can make one sub sound good in one seat. You can't make one sub sound good across 6 seats. Like in the same way, you're going. Someone's going to fall into room mode. Like you're going to. So for a given output, dividing the output capability you need into 2 or 4 or 8 smaller drivers is going to help you mitigate room modes.
Yes.
So that's the other time when, like, yes, you can buy a sub that's too big, is if you take all of your budget and buy one sub against if your budget is locked, right? There is no more money. Splitting it in half and buying 2 subs at half the budget may give you a better result with one big one. It may not.
Would you agree, though, that ideal situation would be buy the biggest sub you possibly quality sub you can now, and then add another one later?
It depends. It depends on the client. Like, we do a lot of discovery with clients to understand what
let's take your normal client out of the equation. And let's say, as an enthusiast, if you're doing it yourself, is it proper, if possible?
Yeah, right. For my family,
as good as you can.
For my family,
now
that
and
would
then
be
add another
fine
later.
because my wife doesn't care about a load of bass, and the amount of bass I would want would scare my kids. So, like, they are happy with a reduced bass level. So I could position that one sub to give me the result I want when I watch a film on my own, and tune it and position it for one single experience.
Yeah.
To be damned with the wife and kids who actually don't care for that much bass anyway. So yeah, in my situation, one exceptional sub might work for me. That's true.
But going back to your clients, probably doesn't work as well because adding another sub later is not necessarily something that's possible.
Yeah, it's most of the rooms we build, it's one and done, right?
Yes.
They're not looking for upgrades and building work in a year's time. So they want it done. They want it done right first time. And if there's a limited budget, we're doing a lot of compromise on all of these things, right? You've got to balance that budget to best meet their needs. And if that room is going to be used by 4, 6, 8, 10 people, then I don't want one seat that hears almost no bass and another seat that hears huge amounts, like too much, because one's a null, one's in a peak. Because you might, you don't know who's going to sit in those seats every time. And that's just not a pleasant experience for the person that, like, you invite your friend over, they sit in the no bass seat, and you're like, oh no, don't sit in that one. Why not? Oh, there's no bass in that seat. Like, the whole thing, just all the illusion of come and enjoy my beautiful room starts falling apart when you tell your friend you can't sit in that seat. Sit in this. That's not it, is it? That's not what we do. So we're balancing those things the best we can all the time. And it's a challenge. Like, no one wants small subs, but if that's all the budget will stretch to, maybe more small subs is still a good option.
David Cook asks, with speakers, we can calculate power needs using sensitivity and listening distances. Is there a similar rule of thumb for subs based on room volume to estimate how much subwoofer capability you actually need?
Okay, so the answer for this is we're going to get Peter Ayler on maybe next week or someone to go through our best guess at this. We've got a spreadsheet that has got a lot of variables, but we're working on this. We would like to feed this back into RP22 one day to be able to teach the industry how to correctly specify the right amount of subs for the room. And that formula is complicated. We talk a lot about Pullis and about Eric and how wonderful a human being and a wonderful designer Eric is. Eric has a really interesting way of doing this, which is to look at the first room mode. So you find the lowest room mode of the room, and below that point, it's pure pressure gain, right? We're getting room gain. This is now the room's acting more and more like a pure pressure vessel. So instead of calculating, 50 hertz, we're going to do it at the first room mode, and we can work out the speaker's output there, and we can actually work out the amount of volume displacement we need to create the pressure in Pascal, or we can do it in SPL, but we can create a how much actual physical pressure are we applying to this room? How, like, the pressure we're applying, trying to force the walls of this room out, right? We've made a pressure vessel. We can calculate that. How much volume do we displace to create that much pressure? Convert it into SPL. We've got a number. If you know how a sub behaves, you can then calculate how much you'll need at all other frequencies, because we can model it and ramp it from there. So yes, I wouldn't say it's an easy rule of thumb, but it is physically possible to do the calculations. We are trying to simplify it into a step. I want this step eventually to be called the Eilert number, which is what it's jokingly I ain't called at the moment. But we have a multiples of volume displacement. So you could actually work out the amount of volume displacement. So total X max, your linear dispersion times diameter, multiplied by all the subs that are coherent. So they're within a quarter wavelength. We could look at our total coherent volume displacement as a ratio of the room volume. And that is, we might be able to simplify it down to that and say you need this many liters of volume displacement for a room of that size.
I think the easier way to look at this is it's probably more than you think it is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how many people have enough? Well, I know of one at the moment, but he's got 18, 28-inch subs. You have enough, right?
There's very few of us that have enough. And even then, it's funny. Like, I have that in the room, and I would not be upset if I had more. Not because I'm chasing any more SPL. Like, that's people look at that amount of power, and I'm sure they do in that room or in the foundry and stuff, and they're looking at it and going, man, that's way too much. It's too loud. And I'm thinking, it's not about loud. It's about fidelity. And even having experienced this, I could very easily want more.
Right. Oh, I don't think anybody has ever listened in Foundry and said, there's too much bass.
No.
You could look at it on paper and say, that's too much.
Yes.
But I don't think anybody's experienced it and said, oh, that was just like, because there's a volume dial and the client during a demo is generally given the remote. So they've got control themselves. So we'll often run a demo and, we'll take it to a suitable level, but equally we'll give the client the remote. They've got Kscape, they'll drive themselves, they'll pick their own content. And I can't think of an occasion ever that someone has said, that's just too much.
Yeah.
I don't think it exists.
No.
So yeah, there are very few people who really have enough. An interesting question just came in there from Big Street Cinema again. I'm going to ask you this first, because I guess this is what you're doing.
This one
in
or the
your
28?
room, right?
Which question?
This
Oh,
one,
the kicks.
two-way
Yeah.
subsystems.
So the question is, how is your thoughts on two-way subsystems like infra versus kick subs versus bigger amount of subs taking all of the 10 versus 120 hertz?
Where's your view first? You go first on this.
I think ideally you would want one sub to be able to do it all. Mainly because of things like waveforming.
Right? Waveforming changes the game a bit, yeah.
It does. I think you can get away with this because what is it? Schrodinger's frequency, where you're below the room mode, where you're getting into pressurization. And
oh no, yeah. Schrodinger's the transition from modal to statistical. You're below the first room mode.
Yes. So you can get away with it. I don't know that I would notice. I don't know. Because it's next to impossible to be able to demo this. I mean, you'd have to have two entirely different sub setups, or at the very least, you'd have to have a bunch of 28s and then a bunch of 32s, and then a totally separate setup where you could hand off the 28s, handing off to the 32s, and be able to switch back and forth. So I guess you could demo this, but it would take a lot of setup.
in one room, you'd struggle to make it optimal.
Yes.
Imagine having a chunk of 32s in the room that aren't powered while you're trying to generate pressure. You've just got passive radiators doing.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. I don't know, honestly, how. I mean, removing a crossover definitely would help.
that's
Obviously.
where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I think Foundry was the first system built that was waveforming with additional infrasonics added that aren't part of that array.
I think mine finished before yours, but yeah, the same idea
Did you?
applies.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. I think we started building it before you.
Yes,
I think we finished.
I remember. Yeah, because I remember having these conversations with
we had a long
Sarno,
build. Yes,
and nobody
I think
knew exactly how this was going to transpire or how we were going to do it. Are you guys using a QSC?
We have got one now. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't day one, but we've added one to be able to change between waveforming and non-waveforming demos. And now I've got the system as I want it. I'm not sure we'll ever demo it non-waveforming again.
Yeah.
But I think the question here is time to get it right. So I don't get to play in that room every day, and I don't spend every day looking at that crossover. But it has been something that's been on my mind for the last 2 years, and I do revisit it often. And I finally, in the QSC, with a bunch of all-pass filters, and I finally have that crossover in a way I'm happy with it. Would I intentionally do another waveforming system with independent infrasonics? How much can I swear? Not an effing chance.
Yeah.
There is not enough money in the world to make me intentionally design a room for a client that way. Because
it does open the benefit of it, though, regardless if you wanting to do it, because the 28s allow you to get around it. There are a lot of rooms where you kind of have to, I would say.
You are going to run out of room to physically put 28s. I do know of another sub-manufacturer that is bringing out something that its volume displacement might exceed what the 28 does and deliver. Let's put it this way. The 28's not going to sit in an isolated position on its own forever, where it's this unicorn that can play super low and all the way up to 120 and do the whole thing incredible. Like, it's not going to be alone in that field forever.
Yeah.
That's right. There's at least one other product that is seriously interesting that will join that kind of realm in time. This comes back to the first episode we did. It's this timing, like getting the group delay bang on, getting time alignment bang on, getting this. It's hard to get these two things doing exactly what you want, so that they are like, they're just different products. So you're going to have different phase response at that point. You've then got potentially a high pass filter, a low pass filter to navigate. If you don't do that, and we've tried this at Foundry, is not having a high pass on the 21s and letting them just extend all the way down. But if we do that and you combine it with a waveforming, by the time we then want to give 10 hertz, a big 10 dB boost, well, you're then throwing that at the 21s as well. Suddenly there's massive distortion, excursion that they just don't want. So yeah, okay, really, we do need a high pass filter. Like, can it be done? Yes, I now truly believe it can be done, because I am finally happy with the way I've done it at Foundry. But I spent a lot of hours getting that exactly how I want. Like, just the last round of calibration I did on that, just on that crossover, I put maybe 18 hours into just that crossover.
Let me be clear, though, to people that Ben is chasing perfection at this point. You can have a great experience, but having been in the rooms that Ben's been in and knowing what he's trying to chase, he's chasing as much as he can perfection at that crossover
Unicorns,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
the
the challenge is,
28, I think allows, and another one that you may you say is coming potentially, allows for you to do things where you don't need this. But in a lot of rooms, in a lot of subs, it becomes more troublesome, right? Because to be able to have a sub that does everything really, really well, you're asking a lot of a sub to be able to do that. So
yeah,
being able to augment that by having dedicated subs for infra versus kick, it can help, because going back to the conversation we had previously of, it's always a compromise of design of, oh, if I make this trade off, I'm sacrificing this. And if I trade this off, I'm sacrificing this. And there's always that give and take. So the infra versus kick allows for more flexibility, but the compromise there is you're introducing complexity because of that crossover, right? You're introducing, it's like running it's like taking a Bugatti W16 and effectively having two 8-cylinder motors next to each other and having them have to work harmoniously together instead of just having one big motor, where it's a lot easier to deal with. Not that it's easy in and of itself, but you get the
yeah.
idea.
So on my budget, this is like, my world is very different from my client's world. On my budget, the compromise I would make is I'd give up the infra.
Yeah.
That would be my compromise. I
Yeah.
wouldn't try to do on my budget in a realistic, if I was trying to do this without being paid the amount of hours I get paid by my company to deal with crossovers and stuff in our showroom, if I was doing it for myself, I'd give up the infra. If I couldn't, like, can I afford 128 outside of a business, like with money I've paid tax on and drawn down and taken home to my wife? Can I afford 128? No. Can I afford 428s? Don't be silly. Like, can I afford 1828? No, I'd buy a new house. Let's be fair, right?
Yeah.
So this is not my realm, and therefore I'd aim for 18 hertz, not 12 or 10.
Or maybe do that and augment it with tactile transducers or something. I mean, there's ways to, not ideal, but it can be done.
I could on my budget, I could live with 18 hertz.
I think it's shocking. It would shock people, especially enthusiasts, how little content there is down there. Would you agree
I don't
with
know.
that?
I think it shocks people how much there is sometimes.
Well, I'm saying, yeah, I feel like there's less than people would think. It would shock how much there is, but it's definitely not every piece of content, especially music.
It's definitely not in music.
No.
The bigger question really is, do any of the producers even know it's there?
I don't think so.
There definitely are.
Some might.
There definitely are things where it's too much. Like, if it's in an electronic music type thing in a film soundtrack, right? They've created that. They've definitely, they haven't. It's not there by accident. Someone's had to create it. But did they know in Black Hawk Down that it was, the rotor chop was going to be like almost 0 dBFS? It's huge signal at like 6 hertz. Did they know that was there?
Probably not.
I suspect they did, but they didn't ever experience. Like, I don't think they could replay it. I don't think they ever experienced it.
They may have seen it in the waveform, but I don't think they cared, because they probably said, well, nobody's going to be able to do this anyway.
Right. There was no expectation that any commercial cinema would ever, like, it wouldn't have replayed. And nobody, when that film was being produced, was putting out 6 hertz. That possibly was a driving point of R&D for people to start trying to reproduce it. Right. We kind of know it's there, and it's, we're reproducing it 50 dB down. Well, let's see if we can actually reproduce it. But it's there in other stuff. It's there in really interesting things. Like, there's some really low bass in like Finding Nemo and like how to train a dragon and stuff, like even places you would never expect. You know, things like Interstellar. Okay, right, you expect, right, we'll go through a wormhole, of course it's going to shake my house apart. And I presume do you ever use Interstellar in your place? Do you ever
Yes.
watch that?
Yes.
I suspect it feels like it's trying to shake your entire house apart.
The interesting thing about infrasonic being done well and it not is how I describe it to people that are going through the experience is it still feels like it's in control. It never gets to the point, and I'm sure you're this way in Foundry, where it just feels violent. It does to a point, but it feels like the system is in control of itself. And the
Yeah,
difference in immersion that takes place during that time, you go from, "Oh, this is a lot of bass," to never being removed from the content. Like, when I watch Interstellar Into the Wormhole, I am in the ship. Like,
right.
the moving that's happening and my pants moving and, like, watching women's hair next to me, it's moving a little bit. It adds to the feeling of I'm in the ship, in the wormhole.
Yeah,
I'm not looking around at the room thinking, "Oh my god, the room's gonna fall." But that never happens because the room is in control. And I
yeah,
think that is a difference between infrasonic subs that are able to be in control at these frequencies and not just the subs, but the room. Like, it takes a really well put together room. I don't hear the room really when I'm in these
sure.
positions because there's 8,000 pounds of plywood in that room. And the amount of mass that's in there, you don't hear the room. And so the immersion is never broken. So regardless of how far down the frequency range you're trying to go, I really encourage people to not break the immersion. Don't go so far that the room can't handle what you're trying to do because you're just removing yourself from the magic that is those moments. And when you can actually experience those without being pulled out of them, it's a totally different experience. And I can't really put it into words except that there's times where I'll sit in there and just laugh because of how ridiculous it is that you feel like you're there. It's
Yeah,
not, this is a cool experience at how much bass this room does. It's I'm in the room and then feeling when they're coming out of that and they're out of the wormhole, it feels like the whole room is breathing as it decompresses from that experience. And that it's like you're coming out of the wormhole. And I wish more people could do that, but people, especially enthusiasts, have this idea that I need more and more and more and more ridiculousness. And I don't think that's the correct way to go about it. Infrasonic's cool, but I think I'm with you that I would rather have even down to 25 or 20 hertz done really well
right.
than being able to extend down further.
Sure. So one of the things I love with infra is the subtlety this is going to sound stupid because why would you ever do this? But when it's actually unpleasant. So if you watch, say, A Quiet Place,
Yeah.
there are some bits in Quiet Place where there's just this undertone of unease, like you're unsettled. You feel like you're unable to be at ease in the room, like you feel that cloying claustrophobic pressure that it's kind of unpleasant. And here's the thing, it's a horror film, right?
Yeah.
So I quite like that it's got this ability to transcribe that unpleasantness. And just, a horror film should make you feel uneasy. If it doesn't, it's a slasher film where you don't care, right? Fine. But a good horror film makes you feel uneasy. And the infra just has this uncanny ability to just almost affect you psychologically. It's Yeah, I love
I
it.
think we're surrounded more by infrasonic than we may think we are in real life. It exists way more prevalently than one may think. There's a
Sure.
lot of stuff that our ears don't pick up that our bodies are, and the ability to reproduce that in a room can be additive to the experience,
Yeah.
but it's gotta be done
Yeah.
well. Speaking of this, Big Street Cinema asks, "What is the best infra scene when you're testing your system?" Do you have a go-to? I think it
I
depends
don't
on the
know.
feeling you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I look at them as sums of their parts, not their parts individually, right? I think a well done scene doesn't necessarily even need infrasonics. Um, oh,
Yeah, I don't think I often demo things specifically to,
mm-mm.
hey, look at the infra in this. I can't even remember the last time we did a demo where, because of the way we've got our crossover, obviously, to the 32s, and that crossover is happening, oh, I'd have to check. I think it's happening at 22 hertz.
Yeah,
Ultimately, I could just turn them off, right? And right, here's audible range, here's infra. We could just turn them off. That's what you lose. That's what happens if the 32s go away. I'm not sure the last time I demoed that, if I've done it in a year more. So to me, the infra is just a part of an otherwise good scene. I don't
yeah.
go out of my way to
What
just demo
demo do you
infra.
think has the most infra? One that I've started doing again is Top Gun Maverick. It's got a lot.
We use Maverick a lot.
A lot. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I play Maverick a lot.
215 is turning around and watching the 64 move. It's kinda terrifying when it's doing that, and it's additive. It makes you feel like the energy coming out of the jet is there, because if you're at an air show or something, there's a huge amount of pressure that is hitting you, shockingly,
Yeah,
and to be able to do that, you need a lot of surface area, and the 64 and the 32s are being able to deliver that. So, Maverick is a big one. Um, one that I think Adam Peltz would dislike is Imagine Dragons, because it's all artificially added, but there is a lot of it, and if you look at it in a spectrograph, in an RTA, you can see all of the low end energy just go down into single digits. There's like these forks that come off from
yeah,
every one of these base hits, and there's a lot, but it
yeah,
can be, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, it can be too much where it starts feeling unnatural if you turn it up too high. Not if
yeah.
you
I,
turn
I
up
mean,
the infrasonic too high, not the volume, but if it's not balanced correctly,
sure.
it can feel bad, and your brain goes,
Yeah,
"No, this is too much."
yeah. It's interesting. So Big Street Cinemas just said there again, not necessarily for demo scenes that when you're installing, like for our own test reference. So I've got scenes that I'll use where I'm looking to check that the bass is doing what I want, and that if there is a crossover, certainly I'm looking at the whole crossover, the over and under audible range. So I quite like at the moment 13 hours. There's some mortar scene. You know, if that mortar scene should hit pretty hard. Attack on the Continental, a John Wick 3 scene where there's just some great gunfight. There's a couple of shots just before I fall in the pool, I think, that are pretty deep. There's actually some interesting tonality through that bit. Different guns and gunshots sound different. So, yeah, again, like it's not infra specific, but it's all of that bass, including some infra. I'll always put on Blade Runner 2049 to make sure that we're not overcooking the
Yeah,
bottom end.
yeah.
You know, that's a good rattle test. We haven't brought our case kit with us out here actually, so Yeah, I need to ponder what content I've got before I fly home Saturday. Oh, we've got an Apple TV. We'll probably put Blade Runner 2049 on before we leave and just see what. Well, just make sure the house stays standing.
Is there any particular content that you use to make sure that things are correct or feel correct? Well, I guess you just said Blade Runner 2049 is one of them.
Yeah, I've got. I think they're really personal. To me, they just need to be things that
You know well.
you know well.
Yeah.
One of the ones, something to me that it either works or it doesn't, and I now know it really well as a clip, and it tells me a lot about how the system's working, is to watch the first 10 to 12 minutes of Ratatouille. I know that
Yeah.
sounds mad,
No,
but
I agree.
like the first 10 to 12 minutes, so much happens. You've got some great breaking glass, you've got some height effects, you've got an incredible difference in dialogue. So every time Remy speaks, he speaks through the center channel, but his inner monologue is phantom centered because his inner monologue doesn't play through the center, it just plays through the left and right. And the tonality is different intentionally. So you get this real cool mix of his inner monologue against him talking, and they should be perceivably different, but both image in the middle, but they're different.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's cool. Like there's loads going on. You get the little bits of music when he mixes the cheese. You get the shotgun shots. You get the lightning. There's like the first 10 to 12 minutes of Ratatouille. Almost everything you could want to test and listen for and check. That's a wonderful way to spend 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And another one I use loads at the moment when I'm listening for things, like I'm listening for spaciousness of the room, is from one of the Hobbit movies, maybe Desolation of Smog. It's the I Am Your King scene in the cave. He's basically going crazy. You've got dragons in his
I think that's
mind.
Desolation of Smog.
Yeah, that's a wonderful few minutes of just spaciousness of enveloping inside that cavern. That's a great scene.
One of mine, I really like Fury.
Sure.
Fury, tank destroyed. There's just so much that happens in that scene.
Yeah.
High pitched, high frequency stuff to infrasonic stuff. It's everywhere. The main issue with it, though, for a lot of, if you're trying to demo to clients, is it's really violent. So it's not necessarily a great demo scene, but making sure a system can deliver everything. That scene to me is one of those that, if done correctly, pulls you in. Like that happened multiple times when we were calibrating the experience center. We'd turn that on and we'd be stuck. Instead of, hey, let's just check this, watch it and on, because you were just pulled in. So that, I always go back to A Star Is Born, but it doesn't have a lot of infrasonic stuff. But making sure that tonalities are correct, the bass is hitting correctly, your time alignment's right.
I think so. Always Remember Us That Way, or This Way, or whatever that song's called, from Star Is Born.
Yeah.
That is a great track to check if you're running the bass too hot generally, because it just gets woolly and overblown. Like if you've got too much bass, that track does not do well. Like if you've got too big a bass boost, too big a taper, it starts to just sound really bloated and not musical.
Speaking of too much bass, would you agree that as the quality of bass increases in a room, the less you're finding that you have to artificially increase your house curve? Like as you're able, as your bass gets more dialed in, and as you get lower and lower distortion, you find as you're able to deal with pressurization better, you're not, and even as your experience gets greater, you're not artificially boosting to the point that you may have in the past for the house curve.
Yes, and I hadn't ever considered it in that way before. That's almost been a revelation to me as you asked the question. Because yes, so often when you're boosting it, you're trying to fix a problem that you
Yes.
didn't know you had.
Yes. You're chasing, in my eyes, you're chasing
yeah,
tactile
right. I
by
hadn't
artificially boosting the house curve.
I
You're
hadn't
chasing
considered it in
feel.
that way, but yes, if you can get the time alignment and that, as we talked about before, once you're getting that feel, you can often get that feel at a lower level. So you like often that reason for boosting it is to generate more feel. And if it's poorly set up, you just keep turning your level up, trying to get more feel, and you'll get some.
Yep.
But if you just dial it in better, you'll get more feel without raising the level.
Yep.
And it's a balance that I do, but I hadn't ever considered in quite that way of, the more you dial it in, the less level you need of it.
Yep.
But yeah,
and I
absolutely.
find the more the bass is dialed in, the more I'm wanting more and more high frequency because it seems to congeal more. Like
right.
I feel like I'm masking higher frequency experiences with low end. So I'll sit there and be like, this is too much. Then I'll end up turning things down and bringing up the overall volume. Just find that interesting. So back to there was a question initially on, I think it was budget, and this is going in the same direction. Keldrick 4627. This is really hard. Says, from a budget point of view only, what is a good ratio of money spent on speakers compared to money spent on subs? I'm 744 setup. I've spent 75% on subs and 45% on speakers. I would
55 on subs.
Sorry, 55 and 45. I would actually, looking at the spend in my room, and maybe you're the same, it's pretty shocking how close it is to 50-50.
Yeah. It's rare that I'm trying to think in the last 2-3 years, I would say it's rare that there are rooms I'm designing where the spend on subs is less than 50%.
Yes.
But rarely more than 65.
I think a safe way to say it is you should, in a properly thought out room, spend more on subs than you do your speakers.
I think there is going to be a point when you can't spend any more on speakers. Where you've already we've designed systems where we've kind of got to this point. It's like, right, this job we're working on now has 5 black swans.
Yeah.
We designed a room a while ago where we were looking at Bluehorn behind the screen. Well, at the point you're looking at Bluehorn, where else would you spend money?
Would you say that diminishing returns, though, is higher on speakers than it is on subs? The net gain that you typically get from spending more on subs far outweighs, in my opinion, what you're going to gain spending more on speakers.
To a point. I think low budget, there's some big gains to be made early.
Yes. I would agree with that.
And I think, getting your LCR up to a really competent level is that's the first key. There's no point having $99 LCR and $2,000 of subs, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Too big a mismatch. But once they're really competent, then and the other thing is, and this kind of breeds into the other questions, is going from 1 sub to 2 to 4 doesn't necessarily mean losing money on the investment on the first one. If you buy an LCR and you upgrade them, you're going to part them in or you're going to trade them. They're going to get sold on, right? You might get back 60 cents on the dollar. You might get back a bit more, a bit less. But every time you upgrade your LCR, let's say you're going to lose 35% of what you spent on them. Well, those incremental upgrades, doing that a couple of times, suddenly your value's getting worse because you're losing money on the trade-in.
Yeah.
But with adding another sub, you don't lose the money on the first one because you keep it. So adding subs to a system can become relatively better value because you're upping the performance and you're not having to trade in kit that you've already spent money on.
Would you agree that people typically spend too little on subs?
Sure.
I would
Sure.
agree. I think subs in a lot of systems become an afterthought. Like, oh, I don't care about the low frequency. And in my opinion, a lot of times they don't care about the low frequency because they've never experienced it well dialed in.
Yeah. I can answer the last question which came in right then really quickly. Some stories about Maya Bluehorn in the future. That's really easy because the client chose something different. So sure, we specified them. Client chose something different, so we still haven't installed them. I don't think I've actually installed a set of Bluehorns ever. So
I haven't either.
I've worked with Asherons and some other stuff. I don't think we've ever installed a set of Bluehorns. So although we've specified them or we've put them forward because they've been suitable, generally at this point we'll put forward to a client an engineering brief. This is what has to be achieved, and say these 3 product choices will do it, and the client will be part of that decision. They may have preferences. There may be a reason why they're drawn to one brand or another. So often we'll narrow it right down to a shortlist and then have a discussion. And when we, maybe even the last 2 times we spec'd Bluehorns in that last shortlist, clients gone a different direction. But you can't spend more. Like, there would be nowhere else to go once that's the spec.
Like, there is an end.
Yeah, there is an end.
There, at least right now, until technology changes and stuff, there is an end for speakers that, like, this is all you're going to get. There's nothing that's going to deliver something that's better. There is an end. Macro Proxy says, let's say I have 2 older SVS SB3000s. Money not in the equation. Should I add 2 more of the same or 2 larger SB17s? Let's assume you rely on Auto EQ, Dirac Art, or similar.
So I hadn't read the second part of that question when I saw it in the chat. I was going to say it depends how good a calibrator you are. And now I see it's Auto EQ, Dirac Art, or similar. I've not had great results in the past with automated systems mixing different subwoofers. So my preference, I guess, would be to keep them as identical. But that's a challenge because I think SB3000s are great. You know, I've been in rooms that have got a couple, you know, between 1 and 4 of them. They do a great job. I think with some budget, you can definitely better them. So it's a difficult one. I'm not sure I've got a really solid answer there. I would be concerned about Auto EQ's ability to get them to do their best in a mixed system.
Mm-hmm.
But equally, the SB17s would, I mean, they're better, right? So do you have any insight there?
I don't like mixing subs when you don't have to. Even sealed with sealed. Like, you can have a good experience. I think what Ben is saying is you're just leaving potentially performance on the table because there are phasal differences. The time domain, there are differences.
Yeah.
And while Dirac Art does a pretty good job of dealing with it, I can't promise that it's going to get it right. Now, in saying that, you may have a great experience. It may work out. And part of ignorance, and ignorance isn't always a bad thing, is
No.
being okay with it. That's okay. So while, yes, mixing subs can be bad, well, it is bad, regardless if it's ported.
It's suboptimal.
It's suboptimal. That's a better way to put it. While, yes, ported mixing with sealed is the worst, even mixing different size drivers, different cabinets, all of that is non-ideal. It's suboptimal. So I think I would do this. I would keep the SB3000s. I would add the SB17s, and then I would eventually change out the other two SB3000s for two more SB17s.
There's a good answer.
That's what I would do. Would you do anything other than the SB17s? I mean, for the budget, they're pretty good.
I
$3,000
cost actually.
I think they're $3,000. Roundabouts, high twos, under 3K.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of product that I don't have enough familiarity with to say, yeah, do this over that. Like, there's plenty of things I've heard that I really like.
If you were in that price range, what would you do? Regardless of this suggestion. If you were going to recommend to somebody a $3,000 sub.
You're going to hate my answer because it's so boring and it's so me, but I would start with the engineering and work out what I needed it to do. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. I don't know. I mean, they're great subs, so I'm not going to say I would advise someone against them.
Okay.
Would I prefer, like, if I had $3,000 to spend, I'd be getting however much little per listen $3,000 buys me, because I just love what they do, and I've only got a really small house, and my family don't like bass, so I'd get really good quality small for however much. I don't even know what 3,000 would get me in small
around an
subs.
R12.
But yeah, I'd want two. So probably, like, can I get a pair of R8s for that? I don't even know. I'm so terrible with price lists. But for my money, I'd have a little pair of per listens, because they would suit me and my home and my family, and they would suit our use case. Okay. But I wouldn't advise anybody against SB17s.
That's fair. We're at the end.
Yeah.
We've made it.
What time is it here? 10:30. So dinner and bed for me now.
Well, that's not bad. Christian's still working?
Hang on. He texted me a minute ago. I think he's... No, he's on his way home.
Okay. You got any suggestions for another topic?
Do I?
Yes.
Not right now. We'll work one out offline, and we'll have one ready for when I get back to London.
Okay. Are you good to go on Tuesday? We'll work it out offline.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. When do I land?
Saturday.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what time it is. Saturday morning, night. Yeah, I'll let you know. Let me check my flight times and stuff. I'll let you know.
We will figure it out. But gents, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us on this episode of the AV Experience, where we talked about, can speakers and subs be too big? And we talked about speakers for a moment, and then spent the rest of the time talking about subs, like I knew we would, because people don't talk about subs enough. They're over 50% of the experience, and they don't get enough glory. And I wish they got more, but they're just ugly boxes that our spouses or partners typically love to hate, unfortunately. But we will join you again next week. Not sure what the topic's going to be. More than likely Tuesday, but be watching for a scheduled stream, and we will go from there. Stay safe out there. Enjoy your home theater journeys, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one. See you later.
Cheers.